I never imagined that as a doctor I would save a millionaire during a heart attack. In the chaos of that night, everything changed in an instant. The sharp tang of antiseptic filled the air. My gloved hands trembled, slick with sweat and adrenaline. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It was just past midnight, the ER was a battlefield of bright lights and loud beeping machines. I was exhausted, my mind racing after a long shift. Then, he arrived. The doors swung open with a crash. Someone gasped. "This is it!" They shouted. I rushed over. There he was, Mr. Benjamin Wells, the billionaire everyone knew, sprawled on a stretcher, clammy skin pale as paper. Heart pounding louder than the chaos around us. His body convulsed, breaths shallow and rattling. A heart attack. The words screamed in my head as my stomach dropped. This couldn't be real. How was I supposed to save him? I glanced at the worried faces surrounding us, their wide eyes reflecting my own fear. His wife stood there frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Do something," she begged. The emotion wrapped around me, a suffocating blanket that I tried to focus. Each second ticked away like a time bomb. I could barely hear the frantic voices. The medical team, my team, was rallying, yet the tension was thick as fog. Every moment felt like an eternity as I worked, hands shaking as I inserted the feeling his pulsea weak, fluttering heartbeat. It was a reminder that life was fragile. "Clear." A voice rang out, and there was a jolt of electricity through my chest. I felt the surge of desperation mingling with hope. Shock paddles ready, I aimed. The crowd behind us held their breath. The world shrank to this one moment, the faint flicker in Mr. Wells' eyes, the clammy grip of life and death battling with every heartbeat. The moment stretched infinitely. The air was thick with anticipation. His heart stopped again. My heart raced. Could I really do this? A tiny flicker of doubt began to creep in, but it was swallowed by the relentless roar of urgency. I had to. I could save him. All around me, the hospital lights bore down harder, pulsing like a heartbeat. I met the eyes of the nurse beside me, her brow furrowed in concentration. The mild scent of his cologne pierced through the acrid hospital air, a strange reminder of the man he was outside these walls. He was a shadow of himself, but I could feel the weight of lives depending on this moment. That I raised the paddles again. My breath caught. "Clear." I shouted again, and the shock rang. A gasp escaped from the small crowd. It was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. All eyes were glued to him, the billionaire in his moment of truth, held up by fate. And then, a moment. Just a moment. His body jerked. But there was still silence. This was it. Would he wake? Would I become the hero in this true-life drama fraught with tension and uncertainty? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The monitors beeped a slow rhythm, punctuating the charged silence of the emergency room. As I stood there with the paddles in my hands, my heart weighed heavy, my mind racing against time, battling both fear and hope in a space that felt taut like a stretched bowstring. Then, in a disquieting heartbeat, it happened. A weak pulse returned, a flicker of life behind the glassy eyes of Benjamin Wells. "He's stable." The nurse shouted, a faint glimmer of relief piercing the weight of the moment that had enveloped us. I felt an odd surge of energy. I could breathe again, at least for the moment. His wife stumbled forward, clinging to the edge of the stretcher, her hands shaking as she cupped his face. For a brief second, the chaos around us faded as sorrow and hope intertwined in her eyes, creating a tapestry of raw emotion. It was a reminder that every heartbeat was a story, a life filled with dreams and vulnerabilities, now teetering on the brink. But just as hope flickered back to life, a new ache settled deep in my gut. Despite his stability, I could see the shadows of uncertainty lining the corners of her expression, and mine had just begun to surface. She leaned closer, brushing back a lock of Benjamin's hair, her fingers trembling. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered, as though saying it out loud might conjure him back into full consciousness. The reality of their world plagued me. Money, power, and an empire meant nothing in these moments, yet the implications of what it meant, the pressure of expectations, loomed like a dark cloud. What would his worth be if he couldn't return to the life he knew? And what of his wife? How could I ensure that they wouldn't have to suffer, that this moment wouldn't haunt them forever? As I continued my assessments, the specter of exhaustion tugged at my concentration, fatigue creeping in with every decision I had to make. My body felt like lead, and I couldn't shake the weight of anxiety that coiled tight within me. Each breath I took became a silent prayer. I prayed for skill, for strength, for the delicate threads of fate to weave a miracle. Hours slipped away in the harsh lights of the ER, nurses come and go, their faces alternating between concern and relief as they provided updates on Mr. Wells' condition. I kept revisiting his chart, attempting to read the numbers like a fortune teller trying to decipher a future. The phone rang and hushed tones enveloped the waiting room, agents, shareholders, and family members and already arriving. Through the tension, a younger intern approached me, his demeanor reflecting a quiet bravery. "You did everything you could." "He's alive," he said, a hint of sincerity settling into his voice. It was an unexpected kindness, one that melted my mounting despair for just a moment. I nodded, the weight of his words not disappearing but blending into a shared understanding. In the field we had chosen, the lines blurred between life and death, and saving one life should never overshadow the sacrifices we made. And then an announcement erupted from behind the double doors. "We need to transfer him to the ICU." The gravity of urgency was palpable. With swift motions, we wheeled Mr. Wells away, the rhythmic beeping guiding us like a lifeline. His wife trailed behind us, her footsteps echoing with a begrudging resolve. As soon as we reached the ICU, the nurses ushered Mrs. Wells to a small waiting area filled with chairs that looked like they were weeping for those who sat in them. I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes as they prepared him for intensive monitoring, the uncertainty of what came next evident as the life-altering machines beeped around him. In the solitude of that waiting area, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass, a figure on the edge of fatigue and determination. Questions mounted in my mind like a storm. Had I done enough? Would he survive this? Lost in thought, I didn't hear the footsteps until they were nearing me. I turned to find a tall man dressed sharply in a tailored suit. His presence commanded the room, but the intensity of his expression was disarming. "Who are you?" I managed, feeling as if the room had spun around me, the world blurring momentarily. "Damar Wells is my brother," he said flatly, eyes narrowing. "What has happened? Why is he here?" A part of me wanted to shield her from this, but the reality was unavoidable. "He had a heart attack," I explained, words forming in the air between us, fraught with both the weight of truth and the promise of uncertainty. "He's stable, but it's hard to say what's next." As I spoke, the man stepped closer, eyebrows knitted in a fierce combination of fear and anger. "I hope you understand the implications of your work. Our family has a legacy to uphold, and I won't have anyone's incompetence jeopardizing that." The sharpness of his words cut through the air, hanging heavy in the atmosphere. This was more than just life and death, it felt political, like a game being played with stakes higher than any of us could fathom. Tension erupted as I attempted to counter his words, reminding myself that I was not just a pawn in their grand narrative. A surge of heat flushed through me. "My only priority is saving his life," I said, my voice steady. I wouldn't let the weight of his expectations collapse me. I had fought long and hard to earn my place in this world, but as the words left my lips, a chilling realization crept in. A single phone call could turn everything I had worked for upside down. What if his family had enemies? What if there were repercussions? Suddenly, the uncertainty felt far too overwhelming as they began to wheel Mr. Wells away into the ICU, and the double doors slowly closed behind him. The weight of a world turned on its axis felt crushing, and I was left standing alone, caught in the delicate web of duty, power, and the fragility of life itself. Moments later, just as I was about to retreat, a quiet sob reached my ears. I turned to see Mrs. Wells, her hands clasped tightly at the edge of her blouse, anguish wrapped tightly around her heart. She could see what I could barely grasp, a changing tide of fate lingering just outside an uncertain future. Each second felt like a step closer to a cliff's edge. "Please," she cried softly, "don't let him go." Her words pierced through the air with an urgency that shook me to my core. And suddenly, I was reminded that I wasn't just a doctor, I was a literal lifeline, a beacon of hope for a heart unwilling to surrender. I nodded once, my throat tight. Whatever it took, I promised myself then, I would do everything in my power to help him survive. But what I didn't expect, as sharp glances and quiet tensions swirled around me, was that this storm was about to unleash its fury in ways I could never have anticipated. The hours blurred together, one dim light strobing into another as I paced the sterile floors of the ICU, each minute stretching on like a taut wire ready to snap. The muffled hum of machines persisted, each beep an echo of both anxiety and anticipation. I could barely shake the unease that followed the moment I had engaged with Mr. Wells' brother. There was something unyielding about that man attention that gripped me tight and unsettled my already fragile thoughts. As darkness fell over the hospital, the overhead lights cast long shadows that mirrored my trepidation. I longed for a reprieve, a moment of silence away from the weight of decisions and the fear of failure. I slipped outside, where a gentle breeze caressed my skin, a fleeting whisper of nature that reminded me I was alive, too. I closed my eyes, letting the night swallow me whole, trying to stave off the clenching dread that refused to loosen its grip on my heart. In the distance, laughter bubbled from a gathering life continuing in the world outside while mine felt suspended in uncertainty. The contrast tugged painfully at my chest. What did it mean to save one while others moved forward with their lives? As I stood there, battling the tidal wave of thoughts, I caught sight of movement from the corner of my eye. It was the young intern, the one who'd offered me those kind words earlier. He approached, concern etched across his brow, reminiscent of my own. "I thought you could use some company," he said, a touch of warmth coloring his voice. "How are you holding up?" The question forced me to confront my own emotions, an unsettling blend of exhaustion, doubt, and a flicker of hope. "I don't know," I confessed, running a hand through my hair. "I keep replaying the moments, wishing I could have done more. The first time is always the hardest," he offered softly, stepping closer. "But you did what you could. And that matters. You brought him back." His unexpected kindness served as a reminder that I wasn't alone. I took a deep breath, drawing strength from the sincerity in his eyes. "Thank you, really. It means a lot." We stood there for a moment, finding solace in silence while the world unfurled around us. But even as I shared that space with him, a darkness loomed over my mind. The threat of Benjamin Wells' family, the stakes that had danced like shadows just out of reach, remained a constant worry. Then the tension snapped again, as a flurry of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Nurses and doctors hurried past us, urgency etched across their faces. My heart began to race, an instinctual response to the charged atmosphere. "Come on," I urged, following the commotion. We entered the ICU, the machines now frantic and erratic, their beeping a dissonant symphony that signaled something had gone horribly wrong. I rushed to the nearest nurse. "What happened?" "Spike in his vitals. They're prepping for an emergency procedure," she replied, eyes darting, her tone clipped. Panic surged within me as I sped toward Benjamin's room. I could see the chaos unravel, doctors shouting instructions, nurses scrambling with supplies, each moment steeped in a palpable urgency. My heart raced, adrenaline coursing through me, merging fear with the instinctive drive to battle for his life. When I stepped into the room, I was met with an overwhelming sight, a flurry of gloved hands all working deftly, trying to bring stability back to the chaos. I took my place among them, my training kicking in, rallying my focus amidst the swirling storm. The tension in the room was suffocating. Beeps turned into a cacophony, and I did my best to center myself, to be a steady force in the tempest. I could feel the weight of Mrs. Wells' anguished gaze piercing through the glass, fear radiating from her. The split second between hope and despair seemed to bloom around us, each heartbeat a question, a prayer. Then it hit me: very choice I made felt like a direct reflection of my struggle to balance their lives with my own frailty. Would I be enough? Would I hold them together when everything lay in ruins? As the doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Benjamin, suddenly an alarm blared, reverberating off the walls like a harbinger of doom. I grabbed hold of the nearest nurse and nodded, shifting into a new level of focus. Together, we rallied our strength, pouring everything we had into that singular moment, pushing against the tide of fate. With every passing second, the tension spun wildly from desperation to determination. But just as we appeared to regain control, the door swung open, and Mr. Wells' brother burst into the room, fury evident in his expression. "What are you doing?" I shifted my gaze from Benjamin to the sharp intensity of his eyes, feeling the clash of worlds collide again. "We're doing everything we can," I said firmly, refusing to back down. "Your brother deserves a fighting chance." His rage flickered, uncertain now, buttressed by the intensity of the situation. "He's my family too. Stop being so reckless." Before I could respond, a sudden spike in the machines caught our attention, a new alarm ringing out, the instant shift in tone a vicious reminder of all that hung in the balance. I felt my heart sink, an implicative dread washing over me as the tension fortified. Mrs. Wells' desperate cry echoed back to me: "Please don't let him go." And in that moment, I grasped the terrifying truth: this was more than a life on the line, it was the cascading effect of fate, intertwining lives, a web of legacies and destinies. How many were connected to this fragile thread we were fighting to preserve? How long could I hold their hope in my hands before it all slipped away? Just as I braced myself for the battle ahead, a voice cut through the tumult, an unexpected interjection that charged the air with new intensity. "Enough." Turning toward the source, a lone woman in a plain dress stepped at the threshold. She looked weary but fierce, a presence that bespoke both power and dignity. "I'm here for my family," she declared, her eyes ablaze with determination. With the room caught between conflicting emotions yet again, I held my breath, heart pounding heavily as I prepared for whatever uncharted territory lay ahead. Because how could I know, in this arena of life and death, how the threads of compassion, greed, and desperation would finally intertwine? The tension in the room thickened, each soul holding their breath as the woman stepped fully into the chaos. Her presence commanded attention, and for a fleeting moment, I found solace in her stark resolve. I had dealt with many families in distress, but something about her unyielding grace amidst the storm gave me pause. Was she one of Benjamin's family members? I couldn't recall having seen her before. "Please," she implored, stepping forward. "I need to be with him. I need to help." Her voice, though steady, cracked at the edges, revealing an undercurrent of desperation that mirrored our OWNDMR. Wells' brother shifted, confusion mingling with his ire as he stared at her, caught off balance. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice laced with a mix of protectiveness and defiance. "That's not important," she replied, her gaze scanning the room before locking onto Benjamin's still form. "What matters is that he knows he's not alone." In moments like this, it's the connection that keeps us fighting. That I felt the weight of her words. They echoed in the corners of my mind, reminding me of the countless times my own emotional tether had wavered. The fear of loss stripped raw, and yet, there was a flicker of hope shining through, proof that love, even in its most intense forms, could shape the very essence of survival. "Let her in," I finally said, my voice resolute against the chaos. "We could use every ounce of strength we can find." The room, charged with the gravity of my declaration, seemed to momentarily halt, suspended between choice and action. Damar. Wells' brother hesitated, but the intensity in the woman's eyes was undeniable. She exuded a warmth that filled the space, even as the machines around us blared their alarms. With a heavy sigh, he stepped aside, allowing her to walk toward Benjamin's side. That I resumed my position, my heart racing as the team fell back into our rhythm, breathing with renewed vigor. I couldn't help but glance at her, struggling to understand who she was and what connection she had with Benjamin. As she knelt by his bedside, whispering softly to him, I could almost see the ethereal bond she forged through each word, enveloping him in a cocoon of unconditional love. In the shadows, Mrs. Wells watched, her agony palpable, yet softened slightly by the unexpected light this woman brought. I felt a flicker of gratitude bloom within me, a reminder that in the vast expanses of emotion and turmoil, kindness often appeared unannounced when it was needed most. Then, an unexpected commotion erupted from behind meth nurse I'd been working with earlier, her face flushed with urgency. "Doctor! We need you." She beckoned me outside the room, her posture tight with a new anxiety. "Is it Benjamin? What's happened?" I asked, following her out of the storm that now felt like a distant memory, replaced by this fresh wave of dread. "It's Mr. Wells' brother's collapsed in the waiting area." The words hit me like a physical blow, chaining my thoughts in a vice grip of disbelief. "We're not sure what triggered it, but he's unconscious." My stomach dropped. Another life hanging in the balance, another thread in this already tangled web, and yet all I could think of was the burden weighing heavier on my shoulders. I could hardly begin to fathom the implications of losing both brothers in one night. For every tear shed, every prayer whispered, how many more lives would be cast adrift? I pushed my way through the frenzy in the corridor, my mind racing. As we approached the waiting area, the sight was every bit as chaotic as I anticipated. Nurses hovered over the fallen man while paramedics zipped around, urgency coating their movements like a palpable tension. When I arrived, dread pooled in my chest as I recognized the faces gathered nearby, some weeping, others frozen in disbelief. Mrs. Wells stood at the forefront, her eyes filled with an anguish that made my heart ache in sympathy. And amid the clustering onlookers, the woman from before stood too, her hands clenched together as if warding off a nightmare. "Get him stable," I shouted, stepping forward, urging another nurse to assist. The urgent beeping from the machines mirrored my own escalating pulse, a countdown of hope against despair. As chaos unfolded around us, I caught a glimpse of the woman's eyes, shining with unshed tears, yet burning with a fierce resolve. "What do I do?" she asked in a whisper, her vulnerability stripping away the fierce armor she had donned. In that moment, I realized we were all linked in this journey through grief, connected through shared pain, each soul bound by love and loss. "Just be with him," I urged, trusting my instincts. "Hold on to that connection, it's more powerful than you know." And as I jumped back into the fray, I couldn't shake the nagging notion that what transpired next would shift the very foundation of our lives. What unseen threads of fate wound around us, waiting to unravel the tapestry of our shared existence? Would I also be tasked with holding together this new web wrought by chaos, or would my tether stretch too thin, fraying until it broke? Swallowed in uncertainty, I could only press onward, racing against a clock that seemed intent on ripping fate from my grasp. The tension in the air was suffocating as I watched the medics work on Mr. Wells' brother. The cacophony of voices blended with the beeping machines, creating an orchestra of desperation. My eyes sought out the woman, the anchor amidst the tempest. She was kneeling beside the fallen man, whispering words only they could understand. Something about the way she touched his hand seemed to generate a flicker of energy that coursed through the room. It was both unnerving and beautiful, the way one soul could reach out to another, even against the backdrop of chaos. "Status update." I called out, my voice straining to maintain a sense of control in the fray. A nurse met my gaze, fear etched deep into her features. "We're losing him," she shouted over the din. My heart dropped, momentarily forgetting the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders. Panic fluttered like a caged bird in my chest. "Get the crash cart," I yelled, stepping forward, pushing through the gathered crowd to join the medical team. Every passing second felt like an eternity bending under the weight of dread. I lost myself in my work, hands moving mechanically as I monitored vital signs and called out commands, desperately searching for a sign of hope amidst the darkness closing in. Yet, even as my mind raced, I felt the presence of the woman beside me, a quiet strength that I couldn't ignore. Her eyes locked onto mine, silently asking what more she could do. And at that moment, I realized humanity's resilience shines brightest when we feel utterly powerless. Continue talking to him, I instructed her, my voice steady. Let him know he's not alone in this. Your voice might be the lifeline he needs, she nodded, her jaw set in determination. The gravity in her demeanor inspired me, and I couldn't shake the impression that she was more than just a stranger. Some invisible force seemed to weave her fate with Benjamin's and the brothers in a way that transcended the tragedy. Knotting together their stories, the medics worked fervently, each movement a desperate attempt to grip the dwindling light of life that flickered in Mr. Wells' brother. But as each breath escaped his lips, barely escaping his body, the palpable fear began to seep into everyone around us. Then it happened. The moment I had been dreading arrived like a wave crashing against a jagged shoreline. Stand clear. The sound of defibrillator paddles charging sent a chill down my spine as I prepped myself for what lay ahead. Clear. A jolt of electricity surged through the room as the paddles met his chest. I held my breath, praying for the flickers of life I felt weaving through the chaos, wishing that some force could reach through the veil of despair binding us all, but in that heartbeat of hope, the machines blared a sound I had grown to loathe: flatlining. A collective gasp echoed through the waiting area, a vacuum of disbelief suffocating the air. I felt a ripple of sorrow crashing against me, a crushing despair that clung to my soul, and then, just as despair solidified into a palpable weight, the woman squeezed Benjamin's hand, her voice unwavering. Fight, please. Remember that you are loved. A sudden surge of defiance broke through the despair. Mr. Wells' brother's heart began to rhythmically beat once more, the machines responding with newfound vitality. In that moment, a hush fell over the chaos, replaced by an undercurrent of hope that pulsed insatiably through the air. It was a brief glimpse of what human connection could invoke, shattering the shackles of despair, but the moment was fleeting, tethered to the delicate edge of reality. The euphoric relief was shadowed by the unsettling sense that our relief may be a mere illusion, one that would vanish just as swiftly as it had appeared. Then, from the confines of the room, I caught sight of movement near the entrance, shadows dancing wildly as a figure rushed forward, a man in a suit, pale and wide-eyed. My heart sank, everything seemed to congeal into sharp focus as recognition dawned. There was something unsettling about the look in his eyes, a chaos arching just beneath the surface. I knew who he was: their father, the patriarch of the Wells family. The same man who had been distancing himself from all the turmoil, ostensibly to shield himself from the pain. Why is no one letting me in? What is happening? His voice reverberated through the air, piercing through the fragile serenity we'd managed to cultivate. That I need you to leave, I said, urgency coating my words as I turned back to the fragile fight for survival we were resisting. It's not safe for you here. We're trying to stabilize your son. That he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. My son? Which one? And with that, he leveled the room with a question that hung thick and heavy, threatening to fracture the salvation we found moments earlier. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. All eyes darted between Benjamin and his brother, confusion morphing into anxiety, and I suddenly understood life had crisscrossed their fates too tightly, and one family risked losing all. The weight of uncertainty loomed like a dark cloud, the storm once again at our doorstep, and I could feel us teetering on the precipice. As the words hung in the air, an uneasy silence engulfed the room. The tension was palpable, heavy like a lead weight silently threatening to break us. I could feel the weight of the father's gaze shifting between the two men, the shadows of recognition creeping into his eyes as the reality sunk in. Which one? He repeated, the words spiraling into a desperate plea, though they carried an unsettling sharpness. Around us, the atmosphere had shifted, igniting despair that flickered uncomfortably across each face present. Is Benjamin's at him? No. I asserted, my voice gaining conviction, your son is alive and fighting. Despite the chaos, my focus remained fixated on the woman beside Benjamin, her presence still a tether between us and the encroaching darkness. Yet, there was seconds lost in an eternity of fear as the father's eyes fell on his prone son. Fight, please, he murmured, disbelief threatening to choke him. It was a fractured expression of hope desperately yearning to mend the splintering ties between his family. The breath caught painfully in my throat, I knew too well how fractured families could break further under the weight of grief. The woman, a pillar of unconditional courage, had continued to clasp Benjamin's hand while exuding an oasis of calm that seemed to ripple through us all. "Talk to him, let him know that he's here, that he matters," she urged, her voice touching within the confines of a whisper. Before I could react, the elder Wells stepped back, fists clenched as he struggled with a surge of emotion. "All these years spent apart. I can't lose him now." His voice cracked as raw vulnerability surfaced, unearthing a ghost of guilt layered within him. He was being forced to acknowledge the very heartache he had long avoided. I stepped forward to bridge the chasm forming between a father's pain and a son's fight, the fear lacing my voice softened into an earnest plea. "You need to unite right here, right now. Both your sons need you present, not just in body but in heart. They will fight like hell for you, but you must show them you're here. Please." Tension ebbed towards a flicker of connection as the father's gaze softened, lost between the anxiety and determination that colored his demeanor. Slowly, he moved back towards Benjamin, kneeling beside the woman, who regarded him with an understanding gaze that erased the distance. The two of them shared a fleeting connection, one forged in grief and an unsteady hope. Then, a sudden sound shattered the tense moment. A raucous commotion erupted from the hallway, sharp footsteps echoing as medical personnel bolted through the doors, creating a ripple of confusion. My heart dropped once again, anxiety rising as my thoughts raced. The chaos from outside restlessly beckoned toward yet another crisis awaiting our attention. Is there a serious emergency?" one nurse asked, her voice trembling with worry, despite the universal resolve stamped over her features. No. I snapped. "Right here. We need to save lives." Each moment felt agonizingly stretched, the stakes too high while emotions swirled precariously, alighting everyone's fears. Into our fragile bubble of hope rushed the nurse with tears brimming in her eyes, face pale, her voice shaking. "It's Liam. He's been brought in. He collapsed at the fundraiser." My heart plummeted as if yanked by invisible hands. Liam, Benjamin's brother, had come to symbolize everything the Wells family struggled against. This was the fragility woven within the fabric of their lives, the sharp tapestry of love and resentment buckling under the weight of loss and longing. Is he all right?" Benjamin's father gasped, and the flicker of hope that had begun to blaze was swiftly snuffed out. The words hung thick in the air, doused in a cloud of confusion, despair etching its permanent mark upon all our faces. I focused on my breaths, desperately blocking the clanging of my thoughts. This family had been through enough. "They're working on him. They'll do everything they can." But my voice wavered, exposing the very real chance they might face a similar calamity. Before I could deliberate further, the woman beside Benjamin squeezed his hand tightly and spoke with fiery courage. "This is not over, not yet." The resolve in her voice ignited a spark through the somber atmosphere, as if she carried the collective heartbeat of the room, refusal to yield even to the haunting specter of grief that lurked just beyond. But that flicker, however uplifting, felt frail against the storm brewing within, the familiar storm that threatened to drown them all under its waves. The door swung open once more, and the chatter of voices from the corridor murmured softly. "He's stable." For a fleeting moment, relief threatened to overtake despair once more. Yet deep down, a visceral unease burrowed beneath the threads of hope, a reminder that life, so delicately intertwined, could shift in heartbeat too. But as I turned, my eyes met those of the father, and in that moment of clarity, I could see realization, the powerful realization that love was always woven in loss, and perhaps it was now, when all seemed lost, that they could begin to weave threads of connection back together. The two brothers were not alone. Leonardo and Clara, dear friends carrying the weight of their own burdens, entered that moment, bringing a sense of renewed strength, yet the undercurrent of frailty lingered. I couldn't shake the nagging question that now loomed like dark clouds overhead, as fate dictated its cruel twists upon us: how many more could be saved before it all came crashing down? The room swayed heavily as a deep breath coursed through that sacred space, vibrantly interwoven with ghosts and flickers of hope that seemed to hold firmly onto our souls as the tide was about to turn once again. And as I readied myself for the next moment that could either bind us together or sever us apart, everything hung in delicate suspension like a pendulum ready to fall, teetering on the edge of an inevitable confrontation. In the wake of the critical news about Liam, the room settled into a thick atmosphere, heavy with the weight of unprocessed emotions. The impenetrable silence enveloped us once more as we all grappled with the uncertainty of what had just transpired. Would this family be forced to endure yet another fracture, another chasm of grief where once love had flourished? The woman at Benjamin's side shifted slightly, squeezing his hand with renewed urgency. Her determination stirred something within me, a whispering seed of action taking root. I approached her, my voice low enough to maintain the fragile sense of intimacy we cultivated amidst the chaos. "You're a steadfast light for him," I said, knowing that her presence, as shaky as it was, could nudge Benjamin back toward life's embrace. "His heart needs every bit of this strength," she replied, directing her attention solely on him, her brow furrowing with love and concern. There was a warmth in her touch, a connection that transcended our crisis-ridden environment. Meanwhile, my mind raced, agonizing over the uncertainty swirling outside the walls of this small room, the air thick with the sense of antiseptics, anxiety, and, beneath it all, the faint scent of hope. Such a delicate balance we walked upon. Then the door swung open again, and I instinctively straightened. The nurse, a beacon of professionalism, rushed in along with a solemn-faced doctor who sported a creased brow. "We've stabilized Liam," the doctor announced. "He's in critical condition but responsive. He's asking for you." Liam's voice echoed in our minds, reverberating with the presence of both longing and fear. The room shifted as Benjamin's father sprang to his feet, a frantic desperation coursing through his veins. "He needs me," he mumbled, more to himself than to us, and I could see the internal battle waging between his paternal instinct and the burden of reticence he had carried all these years. Without hesitation, I stepped closer. "You should go to him. Show him he's not alone," I encouraged, my voice steadier now, for the weight of the moment reverberated in my own chest. "Not without him." The elder Wells gestured toward Benjamin, an intricate tangle of anxiety painted across his features. "Then take them both with you," the woman beside Benjamin insisted, her voice imbued with the importance of connection, of familial ties that held the power to heal if only they would let them. The father looked between both boys, one still fighting for life beside him, the other teetering on the brink of resurrection in a different room. For a moment, he faltered, caught in a web of regret and fear. But the steady grip of the woman's hand on Benjamin's revived his courage and, with a newfound resolve, he nodded toward me. "You'll stay with him, I will not leave his side," I pledged, allowing my focus to hone in on Benjamin once more. The urgency of action compelled me. He needed every shred of optimism to fuel his fight. As they hurried out, the doorway swallowed the family's raw emotions, their stepping away a simultaneous act of faith and abandonment. In that empty silence, Benjamin's breaths came uneven. With gentle intention, I adjusted the cooling cloth on his forehead, wiping away the cold sweat that clung to his brow. "You're here, Benjamin. You're not alone. Fight for them, they believe in you." He stirred slightly, eyelids fluttering like fragile wings trying to break free. Was that a response? I readjusted my stance, leaning in closer, but the shadows of uncertainty still loomed over us, an unsettling reminder of the precarious balance of life and death. Soon, Clara and Leonardo flanked me, returning to support the fight for Benjamin's survival. Together, they wove a tapestry of strength around him, their presence lighting the fuse of unyielding solidarity. Each gentle word, each shared memory rekindled in hushed tones served as a whisper of hope that cut through the dense silence. Then, as if conjured by the very essence of despair, a new crisis erupted. The familiar beeping of machines escalated into a frantic crescendo. An alarm signaled that something was amiss. The weariness in my chest deepened, guilt laced with dread flooding my veins. "Stay with him," I instructed urgently to my companions before darting toward the source of the alarm where medical staff poured into the room in a rush. Something had gone wrong. Panic was a spark that ignited in the hearts of the people moving around me. Just outside, I could hear murmurs spilling from the frantic voices of the staff. "Patient shows signs of distress. We need backup now." My heart pounded, echoing in rhythm with the urgency surrounding us. I reoriented, forcing myself to breathe deeply, realizing that lives hung in the balance and time wouldn't wait quietly for our emotional upheavals to settle. In that poised moment between impending chaos and humane action, a thought pinned itself in my mind. The Wells family was on the precipice of rebirth, and yet the darkness had merely shifted its focus. When I returned to Benjamin, maintaining a brave front while the world crumbled around us, a realization seeped in: if our past traumas remained unresolved, the burgeoning hope could still shatter under the weight of the present. And then out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a small journal resting by Benjamin's side, an old leather-bound notebook inscribed with his name. I glanced at Clara, who noticed my intrigue. "He writes everything down. Poetry. Thoughts. It helps him focus." As I tentatively reached for it, she hesitated, as if guarding a sacred treasure. "Are you sure?" she asked, vulnerability hovering between her words. I nodded, a fragile curiosity driving my apprehensive fingers forward. "It may hold fragments of the fight within him, something we can awaken." As I opened the journal, a wave of warmth washed over me, and words etched in his handwriting began to piece together fragments of Benjamin's soul. With every inscription I read, I could sense the depths of his struggle, and in understanding that, a new fuel crept into my heart. Here lay the foundation of who he was, his dreams, his regrets, and harsh realities cloaked in lyrical beauty. Then I stumbled upon a near-empty page, the last entry precariously lingering, the ink barely dry. My breath caught as I absorbed the words: an unfinished poem that captured the essence of his fight, the cyclical dance of hope and despair, the delicate breath between love and loss. "Can you read it aloud?" Clara gently proposed, her eyes wide with intent. A thread of anticipation tethered us together. As I began to read the words that seemed to echo both his fears and dreams, I realized this revelation might just be the thread that binds their wounds while also igniting Benjamin's spirit to fight. But before I could finish the stanza, a sharp beeping exploded around us, pulling all attention back to him. I halted mid-sentence, the deep breath hitching painfully in my throat. "Code Blue." The call pierced the air, a chilling proclamation shrouded in urgency. My heart plummeted, agonized if the ground beneath us had just shattered, and then it happened. A sudden rush of chaos unfolded before us as doctors and nurses surged into the room, cleaving the strands of intimacy knit within those shared moments. The journal slipped from my fingers and fell, the words scattered in disarray around us as if lying in wait, awaiting salvation or despair. In each flicker of desperate movement, I felt the pull of destiny once more, a dark tempest brewing on the horizon, threatening to unravel every fragile thread we had just begun to weave. The chaos erupted like a storm, a whirlwind of scrubs and urgency converging upon Benjamin. The reverberating cries for "Code Blue" echoed ominously in my ears as I staggered backward, reeling from the sudden shift from hope to sheer terror. Nurses moved with stunning precision, their faces masks of focus as they shouted orders and scrambled for equipment. The casualty of our fragile moment lay there, seemingly void of connection, lost in the tumult that surrounded him. As I caught my breath, it felt like the world had collapsed again, mirroring the latent feelings within me and leaving a lingering taste of fear on my tongue. The journal lay forgotten on the floor, the poetry of Benjamin's heart disregarded amid the urgency of survival. Only now did I realize that the hope I had sensed within the words would serve as an anchor, should we ever reclaim them. "Get me a crash cart," shouted a voice that barely penetrated the fog of my thoughts. It was surreal, the way time slowed in the face of such immediate crisis. Clara and Leonardo stood frozen, their looks of sheer despair cutting deeper than the alarms ringing in our ears. As the medical team worked with unwavering commitment, a nurse turned to our small group. "Please, step back. We need space," she commanded, the gravity of her words snapping us into a semblance of reality. With a silent nod, I complied, but the instinct to reach out to Benjamin, to scream for him to fight back, barely let me retreat. I couldn't understand how quickly the hope we had nurtured had been swallowed. A mix of guilt and helplessness twisted in my chest as I was sidelined, forced to watch helplessly. I felt a hand on my arm. Clara's grip was cold and shaking. Our eyes met, both brimming with unshed tears. "I can't," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear. "They're trying," I managed to suggest, though I could hardly believe the reassurance myself. The sight of Benjamin, who fought so desperately to overcome the shadows of his own life, now seemed at the mercy of forces beyond comprehension. Each time the medical team called out numbers and instructions, I was struck by the sheer fragility of existence. How could seconds feel like hours as we awaited the lifeline that would either resurrect him or succumb to the darkness? Liam, I murmured, his name slipping out like a last-ditch lifebuoy. The thought of his brother's strength was my own anchor as I wrestled with visions of the loss of Benjamin, the loss of everything we had struggled to build together. The world felt relentless in doling out pain, making me question if we could ever truly mend what was broken. As more doctors and nurses filtered in, panic grew. Their faces were stern but focused, a dagger of guilt punctuating the surface of my hope every time they scanned the ECG monitor. The beeping had become an ominous heartbeat, drowning out the air around us. Please. We need a rhythm. A doctor urged. Another voice shouted for defibrillation pads, and the urgency spilled into me like a deluge of ice. I squeezed Clara's hand tighter, grounding myself in her presence. I forced a whisper, its tremor betraying my defiance against despair. He can't give up. Not now. The shadows deepened, threatening to extinguish every flicker of faith I dared to hold on to. A sharp shoulder from a passing nurse nearly sent me tumbling backward, but just as quickly, a kind gaze flashed in my direction. He's a fighter. Stay strong, the nurse said softly. It was a moment of comfort amidst the chaos, a reminder that kindness still existed even in such trying moments, but the rush of panic was palpable when another wave of alarms blared, this one sharper, louder, more urgent. The medical team sprang into action, their professionalism commendable even as my stomach twisted in knots. Come on, Benjamin. Stay with us. I thought desperately, mouth dry and heart racing. I turned my attention back to him, searching desperately for some sign of life. Suddenly, I felt a rush of warmth radiate from the journal on the floor as if it called out from the darkness, beckoning me to remember the heart that beat behind those words, Clara. I whispered urgently, gesturing to the fallen journal while my eyes darted between the chaos and Benjamin's still form. The poem, maybe it can bring him back. His heart, his fight. We need to read it. She looked at me, uncertain but willing to grasp at straws, and knelt down, retrieving the leather-bound book from the floor. With trembling fingers, we flipped to the last entry, words mingling with the sound of life and death echoing around us. Read it, I urged, my voice low, yet imbued with conviction. He needs to hear his words. With a deep breath, Clara began to read the unfinished poem, letting the syllables dance through the air that was heavy with both dread and hope. As if the very essence of Benjamin's spirit lingered within those lines, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. There was something profound, something almost magical about weaving his words through the chaos, as if those letters held the power to knit the fabric of his essence and resurrect the spark that remained. But as her voice found its rhythm, the machine let out another terrifying shriek. He's going into cardiac arrest. A voice broke through, sending shivers down my spine. Clara. I cried, helplessness engulfing me as compounding fear twisted my stomach. I was losing him, losing everything. But then, just in that moment of sheer despair, I remembered how precious the words were, cries of a soul longing to be heard. Read louder. I shouted, my desperation interlacing with Clara's tender voice. She raised her voice, echoing Benjamin's heart as if summoning him back to the surface from the depths. This battle is ours to fight, even amid the storm of night, but would it be enough? Would the echoes of a fragmented soul be strong enough to weave back the fabric of life before us? As chaos reigned, I caught a glimpse of something in the periphery, a flicker of light emerging from behind the glass doors that separated us from the world, a figure that made my heart stop. It was Liam, consciousness flickering against the tide of uncertainty, and despite the pandemonium, against all odds, there was a burgeoning semblance of hope encroaching on the despair that had bound us all in darkness. A new conflict blossomed within me. Would Benjamin subsist while Liam awoke? The tethering weight of that single question hung in the air like a fragile thread, one that could only be severed by fate. In the face of a billion impossible outcomes, everything was tipped on the scale of this moment, one filled with breaths held, hearts racing, and the relentless yearning for salvation that we were clinging to our own fragile humanity, a lifeline braided by words and emotions, teetering on the brink of a heartbreaking revelation, and the world around us spun faster than our hearts could hope to The chaos continued its relentless march, drowning out the fragments of hope I clung to. The moment had darkened as I realized that not all battles are fought alone, some are fought at the intersection of life and silence. But just as I contemplated the fragility of our situation, Liam's pale face caught my eye through the glass doors, bringing with it a mix of relief and new fear. "Stay loud, Clara," I urged again, my breath quickening as I caught a glimpse of Liam breaking away from the sobering grasp of his surroundings, his face a tapestry woven with fatigue and fierce determination. What would his consciousness bring to this war-torn moment? Liam's eyes locked onto mine, and there was a question in them, one that seemed to pierce the suffocating air with precision. He stepped forward, a man caught between the recollections of a night spent battling his own demons and the reality of the fight unfolding around Benjamin. The connection between the brothers, mutated by pain, now surged through me, setting my heart racing faster than the alarms that filled the room. "Benjamin," Liam whispered hoarsely, as if the mere sound of his brother's name could bridge the chasm forged by their past. Even as my body screamed for answers, my mind was reeling. I could feel the ground beneath me shift, and with it, an opportunity for recovery and reconciliation. Clara's voice, steadied with purpose, rose above the frenzy. "Each wound may heal, but scars remain visible." In that moment, belonging to both the chaos and the calm, I leaned into Liam, struggling against the tide of uncertainty. "Just a few moments," I murmured, my words barely audible over the relentless clamor. "Your brother needs you. Be his light." And then, as if acknowledging the challenge hanging like a fragile thread between our souls, Liam stepped closer to Benjamin. He reached out, trembling, placing a steady hand on his brother's still wrist, while the up-and-down rhythm of the machines became disjointed under the pressure of his presence. "Benny, can you hear me?" he called, a plea infused with desperation. I couldn't help but wonder if it was too late for the fragile bond they held onto. "Life's storms are meant to shape us, don't surrender," Clara continued, her voice transforming with intertwining strength. Each syllable felt like a heartbeat echoing across the void, carrying the weight of love, loss, and yearning entwined at once. It felt like the air itself thickened and paused, swelling with the kind of tension that could either weave together fragmented moments into hope or tear them apart. That I watched as Liam's eyes filled with tears, each drop a river of unspoken apologies and hope. In that quiet yet chaotic space, I saw him. The brother who had fought his way through personal darkness became their beacon, channeling every ounce of fervor he had left towards Benjamin's desolate form. "Fight for us, Benny," he cried, a tremor in his voice underscoring the urgency of the moment. "Fight like you've always fought. I can't lose you. Not now, not ever." It was then that Clara met my gaze, her determination igniting a desperate spark within me. We were inextricably tied together, bound by the heartstrings that echoed across this turbulent expanse, pushing against the approaching shadow. "Benny, we need you." Clara joined in, her voice soft yet resonant, a prism of emotion weaving through the sterile air. "You're more than just words on a page." Liam's grip tightened, a lifeline in the tempest. "We will face whatever comes next, together. Just stay with us." Yet amidst that rush of hope surged the familiar specter of doubt. I glanced down at the flatlining ECGA void that mocked everything we were trying to mend. The tumult within my chest threatened to spill over, and my thoughts flickered like fleeting shadows, wavering between fear for the moment and longing for the future. Then, a sudden crackle danced through the atmosphere like the first signs of an impending storm. Benjamin's body twitched. My heart lurked in my throat as the team focused anew, lights flashing and masks concealing hope. Expressions, charging clear. A voice commanded. In that split moment, even as Benjamin's heart fought against the currents that sought to pull him into shadows, Liam's presence remained steady, an anchor against the vast unknown. "Don't yield," he whispered, the two words wrapping around me, knitting us together against the chaos. Just as the jarring pulse rose from beneath the defibrillator pads, a voice interrupted through the doorway, sharp and incredulous. "What's happening here?" My heart sank, nerves tightening. A figure stood there, obscured by shadows, but their tone was unmistakably authoritative. How could one more confrontation threaten to shatter what precious fragments of hope we had managed to stitch together? As if the universe thrummed with impending revelation, I steadied myself, preparing to face whatever storm would follow. Was the fight for Benjamin's life about to be joined by another battle, one steeped in scrutiny? Liam held on tighter, eyes wide and burning with defiance against the darkened horizon. And as the alarms screamed louder, each echo resonated like the ticking clock within my heart. Was this moment mean to salvage hope, something we were grasping to hold on, or would it be another fracture in a chain that had already been stretched too thin? I knew we were on the precipice of discovery, with consequences that could irrevocably twist our story. With each second unfolding, my thoughts spiraled. There was little more I could do. All I could cling to was the fabric of their brotherhood, desperate to see them rise against every shadow that sought to swallow them whole. In this gripping silence, anticipation swirled, counting the breaths that could either heal or utterly transform the course of our lives. The chaos in the room seemed to stretch time into a fragile veil. Every pulse of the machines echoed the uncertainty gnawing at my heart, the threat of loss mingling with the flicker of hope. I turned my gaze back to Benjamin, lying still beneath the stark fluorescent lights, the weight of our collective breaths hanging over him like a shroud. "Benjamin, you're not alone," Liam repeated softly, his voice trembling, pushing through the tension that filled the space. The determination in his eyes felt electric, igniting something within me. "Fight like you always have. Remember why we're here." And then it happened. As if summoned by the cacophony of emotions and the shared desire for life, Benjamin's eyelids fluttered ever so slightly, an almost imperceptible flicker that sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. "Clara. Read the poem," I urged, the urgency spilling from my lips like a lifeline. Clara's resolve crystallized as she grasped the journal tightly in her hands. "Fight for us, Benny. You're so much more than just words," she implored, her voice unwavering. "Your words hold strength," I joined in, urgency pouring forth in an invisible thread weaving through the chaos. "Let them bring you back to us." With every passing breath, Clara's voice filled the room. "Not all storms last forever, some simply mold the hearts that endure." It felt almost surreal, the way her words intertwined with our collective heartbeat, each syllable drawing in the hope nestled within us. It was then the atmosphere shifted, the tension that weighed heavy began to thaw, and Benjamin's body responded, a tremor of life filtering through the stillness. The machines mirrored this new surge, alarming yet hopeful, an echo of his soul calling back from the precipice. The doctor at his side looked up, surprise etched across his features, the urgency of the moment blending with a dawning realization. "Stay with him," he urged, his focus sharpened. My heart raced, the knowledge that sometimes, connection can fuel the fight against darkness. "Stay with us, Benjamin." Liam pressed, his hands steadying, anchoring against the encroaching shadows. The rawness of the moment ignited fury within me, a desperate plea that transcended words. There had to be more to fight for than ourselves. And then came a miracle, like a flicker of dawn breaking at the edge of night. Benjamin's body twitched again, and his eyes fluttered open, albeit faintly. The sound of the machines pulsating began to shift, rising in rhythm, each beep now telling a story, a reminder that he was not lost. "Benny!" Liam exclaimed, his voice filled with fervor as tears pooled at the corners of his eyes. "You're with us. Just breathe, fight," Clara echoed, her voice tender, wrapping around Benjamin like a warm embrace. "You're still here. We're here." The juxtaposition of joy and fear was dizzying. But as I witnessed Benjamin's struggle, the fleeting moments where consciousness fought against the void, I could hardly allow the hope to tether tightly to my heart. The storm was not over, too many unresolved threads still loomed in the backdrop, waiting to intertwine, waiting to impact the delicate balance we so earnestly sought to preserve. "Code Blue" echoed around us, forceful and unyielding, chasing the ebbing tide of relief the room tried to claim. But there, amidst the chaos, I could see glimmers of strength resonating from both brothers, unwavering against the tumult. Suddenly, I was jolted back by the memory of Liam's previous words, filling the space, the connection they shared, the bond they had battled through storms. I could feel the collective energy shifting, igniting room with a bravado that surpassed mere survival. It was resolution. "Fight through it, brother," Liam pleaded again, remaining steadfast and hopeful as if every sheer thread of their past wrapped tightly around Benjamin, refusing to let him slip further into darkness. Clara and I kept encouraging him as if summoning the very essence of his life. "Remember your dreams, Benjamin. Let the words guide you," I implored, heart racing as I struggled to center myself amidst the frenetic atmosphere. Then, in a moment that felt suspended in time, Benjamin's chest rose sharply, a gasp cutting through the air. The machines hummed, filled with newfound life, straining against fate, fighting against the darkness. Together, we held our breaths, watching as the flicker of awareness returned to his eyes. "Benny?" Liam's voice trembled with cautious hope. "Can you hear me?" "I'm here." Benjamin's voice came out in a soft whisper, deep yet fragile, a raw ember encased in vulnerability. His words barely formed, and yet the mere act of speaking sparked vigor through the room, sending ripples of disbelief and joy colliding together in tender waves. "I can't lose you, don't you dare." Liam squeezed his brother's hand tighter, and I felt the crackle of connection soar, a bridge rebuilt between them as the shadows of the past began to flicker away. In that encapsulating moment, I recognized that healing wouldn't come without scars, but in the midst of shared vulnerability, there lay a path to acceptance and grace, one woven through the strength of love, forgiveness, and the power of family, even in the face of tragedy. With every heartbeat echoing his fight, Benjamin had awakened, and my soul exhaled alongside him. As the tension began to dissolve into quiet joy, I glanced at Clara. We shared a knowing smile, a momentary connection that illuminated the fragility of life and the grace that emerged from symmetrical losses that dared to shape us. Suddenly, the door to the ICU swung open, and there stood their father, determination etched into his features. An unexpected alliance formed amid cries and revelations. "I'm here for you," he declared, stepping forward, vulnerability radiating from him. Liam met his father's gaze, a flicker of reconciliation dancing within. The weight of shared shadows faded, allowing space for healing as solidified memories of love interlaced with painful truths. The room burst with tension and life as the emotional turmoil swirled around us like a storm seeking refuge. But now, we stood together, a multitude of hearts woven together to generate healing that would ripple beyond the ICU walls, a collective story emerging from threads of despair, pain, and tenacity. As I stood pressed against the glass, absorbing the compassion and struggle in the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of connectedness, not just to Benjamin or Liam, nor to their family, but to everything that defined our very human experience. The boundaries once insurmountable began to blur. In that sacred space, woven in profound silence, I whispered the promise of hope, a flickering light shining through darkness, illuminating the shards of what might have been lost. "Together, we fight," I sighed softly, absorbing the heroism encapsulated in every heart present. And somehow, in the release of every breath shared and every struggle faced, it felt almost right. It was as if I could decipher the intricate web, beautifully tragic and triumphantly hopeful. That, amidst uncertain futures, love would remain the guiding star, the powerful force unchanged. As I stepped back, ready to embrace a world washed anew by the storm we had weathered together, I allowed myself the words that our stories mattered, that every heartbeat echoed a deeper truth. And with that certainty solidifying, I breathed deeply, resolved to keep that light burning bright no matter what trials lay ahead. A reminder that from shattered dreams can emerge the very essence of life, a reminder that we all fight, and we never do it alone. "Remember this moment, because we are stronger together," I promised softly, whispering against the delicate threads of life that bound us all. It was a promise I held sacred, a patchwork quilt that covered the unexplainable scars woven into our hearts. Together, we endure.